Good afternoon, evening, no matter where you are. It's a happy Sunday. And today I am so glad that we have a lot of guests today. I think it's probably the most guests we've ever had. So let me bring, I can't see, so I gotta lean up every time I talk, which is like hilarious to me. But eventually we'll get it together. Let me bring my co-host on. What's up, Mr. Sinclair?
Good afternoon, my sister and everybody that's chiming in. I'm doing well. Had a pretty good day coming in from traveling over the weekend, visiting our kids throughout the great state of Texas. You know how I do.
Awesome sauce. So you got some more people coming to Prairie View.
Yeah. I was up hanging out with the AKAs at Lewis. Excuse me, my bad. Don't want to make that mistake. I'll be at Louisville this week. Little Elm in the northeast suburb. In the Dallas suburban northeast. I believe that's actually Frisco, Texas. So yeah, had fun.
Backyard names that nobody heard of.
And you would be happy to know Waxahachie was all right.
I still don't believe there's a Waxahachie, Texas, but hey, you say it exists, I'll agree. For the sake of not arguing. But so today we have an exciting topic, and we probably have the most guests that we have ever had on here. We're going to have a panel discussion. Can you believe we're doing that today?
It's going to be live.
So this panel discussion, now usually I consider myself to be like the smartest person in any room that I walk in, but right now I think I'm on a level playing field today. Everybody in here is content heavy and they know the information. So today we're talking about critical race theory. And you know about critical race theory, right?
Yes, indeed. That's one of the hotter topics.
It's a very hot topic. So today I have 4 of the most amazing people in the world to tackle this topic. I always pray, think before I ask people to do stuff. I'm like, who can I use to talk about this topic? But we got some heavy hitters today. Even talking before the show, and we was just branching off. You know what? I'm about to bring them on. And once everybody is on, they're going to start introducing themselves so you can be impressed with what I know as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
We have Mr. Creamer. We have Dr. Perry. We have Dr. Scott. And we also have Dr. Finkley. So we have some very distinguished guests today. But before we get into our topic, I want them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they do so people won't think like, hey, she got these guests on here. They don't really know this topic. But I am so glad that y'all have taken time out your day to join me and Mr. Sinclair on Let's Talk About It as we attack critical race theory. But first, I want the guests to know you. So, Mr. Creamer, let's tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, first of all, I appreciate the invite. I'm happy to be here, my fellow educators, sisters and brothers. Again, Bernard Creamer. I grew up in Chicago. I've taught and worked as a school administrator in Chicago, in Washington, D.C., where I currently reside, and in Dallas, Texas. I'm also a community activist, advocate for our youth and communities and families, and I'm also an author as well. One of the books that I've written, speaking of systemic issues, is entitled Who Stole the Soul? And it basically deals with this country's media apparatus through the context of hip hop, utilizing the history of hip hop and American history to basically bear out the truth about how systemic propaganda works in our communities. And I've also written 2 children's books for Black boys and Black girls that basically deal with those revolutionary ancestors that fought with potent movements to try to expose basically what amounts to systemic racism, capitalism, imperialism, and those sorts of things. So that's who I am in a nutshell. Again, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we also have Dr. Perry. Hello, hello. Thank you for having me, Monique and Mr. Sinclair. Originally born and raised in the Bronx, moved to Dayton, Ohio, which is where I reside now. Been here for 30 years, but I still claim, New York in the Bronx. That's where my family is. I am founder of Perry Institute for Natural Health. I am a holistic doctor and educator. Been an educator, as you can see in the background, I am in my classroom. Been an educator for over 20 years. And last but not least, I am an opera singer. So I can't wait to have this necessary conversation with my fellow colleagues who are on here. And that's about it. Awesome. Awesome. We have Dr. I know I'm in a room full of doctors today. This is nervous. Dr. Julian Scott.
I know, right?
Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Julian Scott. I go pretty much all over the place. I'm in rural Georgia as well as Miami, Florida. Currently, I reside in Houston, Texas. I'm an assistant professor of the Administration of Justice program at Texas Southern University. I've also held faculty positions at Prairie View A&M University as an adjunct and at Wiley College as an assistant professor. Let's go, great debaters. Okay, so I plan to bring some flavor to the table. I've also produced a plethora of journal reference articles. Most important area of study is criminal justice reform, as well as looking at the increased numbers of unarmed Black male interaction with police officers and their outcomes. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Michael Finkley.
Hello, everybody. I am just so excited to be here and chat upon this important topic that is trending within our society today. So thank you, Monique. Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair, for having me on. Again, my name is Dr. Michael Finkley. I am an educator. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I'm an advocate. I have taught within the school system, English, literature, so preparing our students when it comes down to important topics as this through literature, and also on the collegiate level. Currently, I am the executive director of the Finkley Experience, where we open up our doors and hearts to students that want to pursue a career and for go to college as well. We have our publications here. Right here are college publications for our 9th through 12th graders, and also one for first year students as well in college. And I'm also the host and executive producer for the Michael Finkley Show, as you see behind me, where we again have these conversations with your everyday persons in society, including some of your favorite celebrities. Those topics including the George Floyd case, and also to the state of Black America, just to name a few. So just to add this on top of what we have done already, it's just amazing. So I'm ready to get into it.
Awesome, awesome. So everybody, as you see, has these like amazing backgrounds. Like I was telling before everybody came on, I'm like, wait a minute, I kind of feel like, do I need to talk to them? Like they status, they have arrived. So let's get into it.
Definitely.
How do you define critical race theory? Anybody can take it from their avenue.
Critical race theory.
Yes. How do you define it?
Critical race theory. Okay, well, race theory is a paradigm developed by the late Derek Bell, and it's a legal doctrine. Okay, first of all, what Derek Bell and his colleagues and scholars that formulated this paradigm want to express those systemic and structural problems in the areas of housing, healthcare, education, and criminal justice. At the time, they wanted the discussion to be narrated by African Americans and their experience, and not how everyone else defines and narrates our own experience. So that's pretty much an overview of the definition of critical race theory.
Okay, our esteemed guests, anyone can on your perspective what critical race theory means to you, Brother Bernard?
Yeah, I don't like to. I like my thoughts to be organized, so I kind of jotted stuff down. But I'm bringing the history teacher perspective, and having taught history for about 20 years now, aging myself. Critical race theory has been a theme long before they started talking about it, the last few years. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pretty much read off the notes I took, and a lot of it centers on what Derek Bell has spoke about. Neely Fuller, he once offered that our lack of understanding of white supremacy will lead to our being confused about everything else. I offer the same as it applies to us not understanding how capitalism works. This country's economic system requires that we are unable to make the connections between the economic system and the very profitable exploitation that comes party to it. Derek Bell, one of the coiners of the phrase critical race theory, was labeled a pessimist once he began to solve the puzzle that is our very necessary peonage. Derek Bell was actually a realist. He began his activist career as an integrationist, but began to see, much like Martin Luther King did later in his life, that there are no moral appeals to this system that will yield equity or freedom for the masses of African people in this country. He began to understand that racism isn't something that can be reformed. It won't be redeemed. Racism is the foundation of this country and what fuels it. It's been long understood that a proper education is the source of both individual and collective empowerment. And there is no power born from an education where the exploited are misled to believe that their bottom ladder rung lots in life are their own doing, while offering total absolution to the protagonist of our peonage. An education lacking critical race theory cements that hierarchical order or that power dynamic and reinforces the status quo. Without critical race theory, the oppressed eventually morph into a mass of victim blamers pointing the fingers at one another for our collective condition, while ignoring the system and the benefactors of the system, those in power. Bell began to understand the ability of capitalism to bend without breaking. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s culminated in laws of intersectionality, nothing specifically to change that power dynamic, nothing to drastically alter our collective condition. The system found a workaround for Brown versus Board of Education. White kids simply abandoned urban schools and moved to suburbs or open private schools. Basically the difference between de jure versus de facto segregation.
Okay. Looks like we had some technical difficulties in there.
I think he either hit the link.
Lost Brother Primer, Monique.
Yeah,
Dr. Perry, is there while we get
Yes. To me, when I think of, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were saying something?
No, he was saying, go ahead, Dr. Perry.
Okay. Let me know if I'm echoing too, so I can turn my mic down.
Go ahead.
But, when I think of critical race theory, I think of, to me, it's the checks and balances, the start of a conversation. So why do we even have critical race theory to begin with? No matter how long ago it began or who began it, there was something going on. That there's systematic racism in the legal system, the educational system, and as we see now with everything that's going on in Texas and around the United States. So it's just really the why. It answers the why. Now, the hard part about critical race theory is the fact that a lot of us don't want to have the conversation. We know we can acknowledge it, but when we get deep down into why critical race theory was even developed, why it was even defined, that's when the conversation stops. So really, we just need to keep the conversation on and stop skimming the fat off the top of the soup, per se, and really get into the why. And the thing is, it can't start and stop with our culture. The culture that actually is the reason why needs to have that conversation and also acknowledge and hold accountability and start to make that change as well. So to me, that's what the critical race theory is. It's the start of addressing the why.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Perry. Dr. Finkley, your perspective.
Yeah, so it's amazing that we've been having the same conversation since the late 1970s and early 80s. And we're still having it today, presently in 2022. So it tells you how far we've gotten. Not that far, right? Because we're still having this issue, right? When I think of this particular concept, again, I love when Dr. Perry said conversation, right? It's just the start of something, bringing all people to the table and having that dialogue of how to resolve this issue, right? Knowing it's not going to be resolved in a day, it's not going to be resolved in a week or a month or what have you. But again, starting that dialogue in order for us to get to a common good for all. When I think of it, it is for all people. And also, too, the issue that people are not really understanding is that, don't have it in schools, but, why not have these different concepts in schools? Because, again, we're addressing an issue. We're having a conversation, right? If students don't learn these particular things in school, where are they going to learn them, right? Are they really going to learn them in the household? I think not. Not in full concept, where it comes from, the foundation, that kind of thing. So we need to separate curriculum versus conversation, right? See where that line divides, and then bringing them together once we get to a common good for all. So again, I love the concept of conversation, having the dialogue, having those persons at the table in order to see the greater good of it all for everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Finkley. Thank you.
So, everybody gave their aspect on it, but how do you think it's going to impact and affect the educational system?
So this is what I feel. This is what I feel. As I was, reading and looking and asking questions, all this kind of good stuff, do we really want to go back to segregating our schools? Because I feel that we have so many of your conservatives saying that, hey, you're saying that all white people are bad. That's not the concept of it, though. It's about having the education aspect of it, right? In order for people to see it and see the whole thing. We're looking at policies and procedures here, right? We're looking at these different laws that we're trying to make equitable for everyone, including race, including gender, including, they're even talking about the whole aspect of sexuality, in this conversation as well. So if it continues to go on to this effect, are Black people still going to go out and start building their own schools now, right? All right, people go out and start building their schools now, because I don't agree with the Common Core. I don't agree with what you're teaching my student in this school, right? So how can we stop that, conversation from happening to get to the core of what this concept really stands for?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point to look at it. Do anybody have a response to that?
Okay, can you repeat your question? Because there was like a little feedback or something coming back on my end. So what was your question, Monique? I heard everything Dr. Finkley said. So, but what was your question, Monique?
The question I had is to what he had stated. I know one of the things that stuck out to me is, do it look like we're going to be headed back to segregation? And another thing that stuck out that made me form the question I had, which was, where do we see the future of education? Who is touching stuff in the background? Oh, I'm sorry. Anthony's here touching stuff. They're playing. Okay, so good. My question was, where do we see education going from this? That was the question I posed.
Well, if they keep throwing books in the bonfire, I don't see why it would be a horrible thing for us to separate our schools, because you're already telling me that my culture does not matter and does not exist. That's what you're telling these kids that are coming up now. And so what happens when we, just in life in general, what happens when we feel like someone doesn't value us? We separate ourselves, right? So why do I have to fight for your love? Why do I have to fight for your acceptance? Why do we have to
And
continue to fight?
I would like to and
Mr. Scott, you went out.
I would like
I don't know if his sound.
Yeah, it's bad connection. But
Yeah.
at this point, from what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling, why would that be a bad thing? Because they're doing it to us anyway.
Okay. I can see where you would come at that angle, Dr. Perry. And like we had talked offline before, about the banning of the books, like the books that are being banned and things like that, is taken away from history that our scholars are being cheated out of. Like, you know, that was definitely one thing. One book in particular I know changed my whole life and aspect. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And a lot of her books are on a lot of Dr. Maya Angelou books are on the ban list.
Mm-hmm.
How would that impact education? They're not going to get those stories told.
Yeah. And the thing is, as a culture, we're so welcoming. Black people are so welcoming, you know, and we need to actually get back to educating each other and educating our own. I don't know any other culture that opens their door and say, come on in, you have something to teach us now. Don't get me wrong. Not to say that you don't have anything to teach us, but it usually when cultures say, hey, come on into our schools, you're teaching a specific thing. When you go over to other countries, they hire American teachers to speak English, not hire American teachers to teach about their culture or about their history. They bring us on the end and say, hey, I want you to teach American history and English.
Wow. Okay. And Finkley was shaking his head, so I don't know.
And that's the thing, though. We are American history. It is all a part of American history. As we look at the greats, Dr. Martin Luther King, as we look at Rosa Parks, going further back, as we look at Sojourner Truth and, you know, Harriet Tubman, you know, we could even add our own family members into this conversation. So what you're telling me is that what my grandmother went through, right? What my grandfather went through, because we're not that far from us being from slavery, right? So what they even did, right? You're telling me it doesn't matter? It doesn't have any place in American history? You cannot tell me that. You cannot tell me that. That's not fair. That is not fair.
Wow, that's
so
true.
The question that one of the first questions I want to ask, I'm glad that my brother Bernard is back. Looked like we lost Dr. Scott momentarily, and I'm glad you're back, brother Bernard. This is one question I want to stir the pot a little bit with our esteemed guests, because it's a question that needs to be asked, and we need to seriously contemplate over the answer. And I think it plays right into today's current society and the state of, if we can call it Black America, especially where critical race theory is concerned. And I'm interested in getting Dr. Perry's, and of course, Dr. Finkley, but Bernard, that's my brother. Can or should or can Black folks be racist?
No.
Against each other?
Sure. Absolutely not. Black people can be prejudiced, but racism is a power construct. And in terms of being racist, you basically have to have the power to determine whether somebody's able to move up or be upwardly mobile, or to be able to I guess, achieve a measure of influence or power. But it's basically it's a power dynamic. So in that sense, Black people cannot be racist.
Okay, Dr. Perry.
I agree. It is a power construct. And it's so interesting is that the interesting part of it is when someone of African Americans speaks about preserving the culture, then that's the box that we're putting in.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Mr. Creed.
That's why I asked the question. Mm-hmm. Right. That's why I asked the question. Okay, Dr. Finkley, here you go. I'm going to add a little more sasheries to yours. So why is it so apt that when we talk these issues, somebody else can call us racist, but we can't reply accordingly? To go inside with that same question, is Black folks can be racist, but when we bring up things such as critical race theory, when we want to stand up and we can tell them of the certain laws that have been prejudiced against us, as Brother Bernard mentioned, how can they call us a racist? How can they reverse that call?
It's all in education, right? It's definitely all education. And also, too, I feel that they're looking at it from one perspective, right? So they see that, the progression of laws, the policies, procedures in that right. And once we establish those things, right? And then we're asking for more and more and more because that's what we deserve. They're in the aspect of allowing themselves not to be educated on what the process looks like, right? Or what from their point of view. All right. They can only see it from their point of view. And not even asking those rough and tough questions, because at the end of the day, if we start getting to those conversations, they're going to start looking at some things where they're not happy at, right? Starting to look at it from another lens and saying to themselves truly that they're actually the racists and not us.
And that's why we have banning going on now.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's true.
And let me ask, at what point did I get cut off, man?
I don't even remember, but we heard your whole speech and then it just went. You was giving some.
You got caught off right when you were mentioning, Brother B, that Derek Bell, as he was coming into the concept where he was trying to go with it, if I can recall. You were reading some of the dynamics.
Okay, well, I'm answering questions now.
That's good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all
Definitely,
good.
definitely. But as we think of those books that are banned, and we think of other things that are parts of this critical race theory, in some states it's an actual law. I don't know if you all were aware of that part. So what do you say to that? Like when I did teach, I taught social studies history. So right now I know I couldn't teach because anybody who was in my class, they got the real deal.
Yeah.
So
the wild thing is they've been I've been a history teacher. I taught all histories, African American history, African culture, world geography, all of that. And over the last 15, 20 years, they pretty much have been chipping away at it. So even before this critical race theory became an issue for history teachers, when I first started, I was reading from these books or whatever that they gave us. When I became a little bit more aware, I used to throw those books in the trash, and I would bring in my own information for our kids. What the heck?
mm-hmm.
My fault, that's my screen. I would bring in my own information for our kids to learn. And then all of a sudden they made the history teacher a literacy specialist. So we all of a sudden became responsible for what the students achieved in terms of their reading scores on a standardized test. And so if they didn't do well on reading, somehow as a history teacher, I could be dinged for that. So then the final stage is now history is on a standardized test. And they pretty much tell you what you can teach in terms of teaching history to your kids. And if you don't teach that material, then the kids are going to fail the test. And then again, you get in trouble. And so that's when I realized that it was I couldn't teach in the schools anymore because never are they going to pretty much constrain me to these standardized benchmarks and all of this nonsense they wanted to teach. They're pretty much aligned with their mission to socialize and westernize our kids. So it's tough now. And then now we got critical race theory or whatever. And it's kind of like when have they been making the connections between these hostile macro and microaggressions and the system. When does that ever happen in the teaching the history or anything in our schools?
I think we have Dr. Scott was back with us, but we probably need to take a break. I am definitely, I know we have several people on here that may have like infomercials. I think we're going to go to Dr. Finkley's infomercial. And when we come back, we're going to attack it hard and start answering some questions that people are texting me and talking about. So we're going to go to the commercial and come right back. I don't know if he can find it. Guess not. I was like, just kidding. I thought he was going to it. But as we go off to commercial, if I don't get cut off, one thing I want you all to think about and come back to answer is, how does critical race theory affect your profession? Because we all are educators. Affect you directly, especially if you're in the school system.
Are you interested in attending an historically black college or university? Hello, my name is Robert Mason. I'm president and founder of the Common Black College application. Our application allows students to apply to over 50 historically black colleges and universities at the same time for only $20. HBCU graduates have been some of the most renowned individuals in their respective fields since the late 1800s. In addition to that, our faculty and staff are truly committed to your success, and they have a vested interest in seeing that you do well. That, coupled with the academic rigor and the fact that you will establish lifelong relationships, are just some of the many benefits of your attending an historically black college or university. So if you're interested in completing the Common Black College app, visit our website at commonblackcollegeapp.com to apply now. Thank you, and get educated.
The thing that drives me every day as a dad is him. Every day he's hungry for something. And there's this huge responsibility in making sure that he's a good person. I think the advice I would give is you don't need to know all the answers. It's okay to make mistakes. As long as it's coming from love, then it kind of starts to work itself out.
We're back. We had a heavy hitter first round. This second round, I guess people are going to really see how it applies and affects them. How you feel, Mr. Sinclair? Your mic is off.
Yeah. Well, again, you said, like I said, the first round went well. We can continue to get heavier into it because we definitely have to get an understanding of its effect and impact and learn or strategize on what we can do, if not as a group, individually, to expand it till it gets to a group aspect. Because of course we're all in education in some way, shape, form, or fashion, whether at the high school, at the collegiate level, and we see the gaps that the system is growing upon when it comes to this topic. So I'm eager to ask a couple of more, left hook questions to get our esteemed panel's perspective on it.
And they come in with the content. I have to give them that. And Dr. Perry, not because she's a personal close friend, but she is holding her own on this panel with me, and I'm so proud of her. But this is facts. They all are dropping facts. So let's just have all our guests come back on, and I left them with a question before the break. Let's see where their head is on that one.
Anybody?
Anybody?
Oh, are we talking about the question in terms of how it affects our careers?
Yes.
Yeah, I pretty much spoke to it already, but I mean, intimately as a history teacher, I understand that the purpose of teaching a people's history to them is to empower them. And you empower them with the truth about their history and their culture. You teach them about their revolutionary ancestors that fought and died and were incarcerated or were exiled out of the country, not just the ones that white people are comfortable with, not just the ones that fit into these little NBA and NFL commercials. It can be co-opted where the narratives can be stolen and made to be some American friendly, something that we can all talk about and embrace. But if we're not empowering our kids, we're not creating community advocates to community activists. If we're not teaching them how everything that's going on in our neighborhoods is connected to a system. In terms of teaching our kids history, if we're not teaching them critical race theory, I mean, pretty much they'll come to believe that everything is fine, while the same system that's always been in existence for the last 500 years is still in place. All right, so they come to see that police shootings are just some exceptional event that happens. They come to see that the gentrification in our communities is somehow the community's fault. We didn't take care of the community instead of connecting it to capitalism. They blame the terrible schools on parents, like the low-hanging fruit. Our schools have always been set up to fail. Number one, because we don't own our schools, and Malcolm X has suggested to us a long time ago, we're foolish for allowing other people to provide education to us. But all of these things, including the wealth gap, including neo-colonization in Africa, we're going to be creating kids that only know how to blame us and blame ourselves, or actually internalize that blame instead of understanding that these issues, they stem from a system that's been in place for a long time. So if critical race theory is not a part of it, our kids will not be able to connect the system or the systemic racism, capitalism, imperialism, and all of those things, these isms, to what is going on every day in their lives. And they'll be pointing the fingers at each other, and they'll be running in circles pretty much.
Wow. Well, I seen, I'm sorry. I got an echo. I think it's because a lot of somebody probably trying to watch while they are on air. So it's a bad feedback. But I think Dr. Perry, he was speaking. He said something that struck a nerve, or he said something that you was snapping with. Oh, okay. Well, what was it?
That we need to get back to educating our own. That's what it's going to boil down to. But also, as far as how it affects my profession, and I'm gonna turn my volume down a little bit. Okay. Well, I still hear the echo, but how it affects mine is that I'm putting students first. And that's one of the key things that my school always says. And the one thing about when you develop a school or organization and you say things, right? You say, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then we put students first. And I want to address that. To what degree? And what are you willing to go through to continue to put students first? And so, yes, in Ohio, it is prohibited to teach critical race theory in, schools, universities, and the government. However, you can't stop the conversation. These babies are coming into the classroom, and they're the ones that want to address the things that they're seeing and that they're hearing. They're the ones that's leading the conversation, actually. So it's not like, I think a lot of people think we come into the classroom and we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do today, and this is what we're going to talk about. And yes, although we may have an idea of what we want to talk about, but these babies are coming in the classroom like, hold on, I have a question. Why is it this way? Why is it that way? And even when we do celebrate Black History Month and we play these videos and they have questions. And so as an educator, I'm not going to ignore their questions. However, it is not my fault that the answers are what they are. And it goes back to being accountable. They need to be accountable. I'm just giving truth. I'm giving an answer. I didn't divide anybody up. This is exactly what's going on. So that's how I handle it in my classroom, and that's how I see a lot of my colleagues handle it. They're letting the students are the ones that's driving these conversations, and I'm proud of them for that too.
Okay, I want to
Dr.
pose
you want
a
to chime in?
serious question here. Okay,
Go ahead.
one serious question. If our children are literally indoctrinated in the educational system from a Eurocentric based pedagogy, isn't that some type of form of critical race theory?
Mm.
I want to ask that serious question. Is that some type of form of critical race theory? But it's not. It's not from a minority perspective. Okay.
I agree.
See, that's how I see it. Now, if my 7-year-old son feels comfortable by reading Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, don't I have the right to protest what my child reads in school? Most books that the most of us have learned from since early childhood education all the way through college from an academic purview has mostly been written and accepted through Euro scholarship.
Mm.
Ask a college student that's minority whether they're if they're at a HBCU or a predominant institution, how many textbooks of scholarly literature that you've read by a Black scholar? How many Black scholars can you name off the top of your head?
Mm.
Okay. And then most importantly, what are we as a culture doing with regards to some of our brothers and sisters that are against the concept of critical race theory too? Because they're the ones that's most likely being the spokesperson for the masses of us.
It's true.
With regards to this, because there are some who exclaim that critical race theory is teaching people how to hate. No, it's teaching me to have a voice.
Mm-mm.
It's teaching me to be able to speak up for myself. And that's very important for me to have a voice. For my kid to be able to know his history, his culture, the uniqueness, the greatness of it, instead of it always being like discarded. That's underdeveloped in my child's mind.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a heavy point. Dr. Finkley looks like I can see it in your eyes. Dr. Finkley, what say you?
Yeah, you blew my mind, Dr. Scott. You really, because you don't think from the other lens, right? You only see what's happening. You will focus on what is actually happening, conversation-wise, to what is versus happening in the classroom. That just really blew my mind. And those people of color that are against it, I get right, being that spokesperson as well. You don't really think about those type of things, just kind of like your own perspective and where you are. So you've allowed us to think outside the box when it comes down to those different concepts. So thank you for saying those things. When it comes down to my business and what I do as well, I'm at a chartered high school here in South Carolina, and just more so on the counselor side now. And it's amazing to work with this population of students. I'm so used to first gen low income, right? And now a more privileged type of student is what the school is made of in many ways. And not to see again where African American history is not really a type of priority for graduation. We're still an elective. We have a white individual teaching black history. That's just another conversation I just don't agree with. And you know, you're not going to get the actual feel and texture and sight of what really Black history is, or what the memes are, how our legacy has changed from over periods of time. You're not going to get that. I didn't learn Black history or the majority of it until I got to my HBCU, and that's when I really became woke. And so that is why a part of my consulting firm, I added the curriculum of Black history, and teaching different focuses on literature. And one of my favorites is Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun, right? So teaching what that means, what that stands for, the proper things of racism, and the living conditions of this family and what they went through and how they felt and all that kind of good stuff, and having that dialogue with the schools I'm partnered with. And this is maybe sometimes their first time in engaging in a conversation like this through my firm. So I definitely saw a need, and I answered that need through my firm. If I can't answer it on the school's dime, I can sure answer it on my own time. So in just those small ways, and bringing the wokeness to everyone and saying, this is what it is, let's have a conversation about it.
That's true. Well, that you all come back with like some heavy, deep things. It had me thinking like, wait a minute.
Right.
So that's
Scott.
Dr. Scott then came back, got the camera light on and everything. He came back with a vengeance. Like, no, they're gonna hear me today. But that was a really impactful statement that you made. And then to apply it, because I have nephews that are that age, and my nephews come back and sometimes they tell me stuff about school, but it does start at home. But when you at a school and like you said, you had a Caucasian person teaching Black history, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Can I interrupt you for a moment, Monique?
Sure.
You said it starts at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with these white liberals, right, if they're saying no, don't teach it in our school, or even some of the Black people, no, are you really going to sit down and have these conversations with your students, right, with your kids, right? Because this is not just a kid thing, or it's a developmental thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have to grow. It's a real thing. You have to grow up in society with these type of things. So how can we not have these conversations now and get them to understand these different concepts in order for them to be a productive adult when they're faced with it alone?
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
But most importantly, what many of us in America want to turn a blind eye to is race is a dinner table conversation, period.
Mm-hmm.
When them doors, whether you're Black, whether you're white, what other demographic of racial dynamic you are in this country, race is a dinner table conversation. But it's more so amongst the different racial groups. Okay. And on top of that, we've transitioned to what they call a cancel culture. Like, if someone utters anything negativistic about the horrors of the Holocaust, all hell gonna break loose.
Facts.
But if we talk about the generational genocide that was and these systemic problems brought upon by slavery, the liberals and the conservatives are going to say, whoa, don't talk about that. Let's forget that. Let's forget about that, because each one of us, each and every last person that's listening to this broadcast has been affected by 400-year damage caused by slavery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree.
Particularly the system, and most importantly, exacerbated slavery. It's called the criminal justice system. Why do we have such a paradigm called the school to prison pipeline? That doesn't make sense.
Based
Why do
off of
we
third
have a
grade.
paradigm that mostly affects Black and Latinx children that said that with the phrase "you're at risk"? What is at risk? I want to be at risk for my child, and I want to be at risk to succeed, not fail. And we
Wow.
should be promoting that within the culture, or they should allow us to promote in our way. Can nobody go through the Black experience the way we've been through it if they are not Black? We're not monolithic people.
It's true. That's true. Dr. Scott, I'm rolling with you. You are speaking straight facts. Speaking straight facts. And I'm glad you brought up the prison to pipeline theory, because it goes off the third grade scores. If I'm right, if I'm thinking, because I know we always talk about stuff like that in different circles. It goes off their third grade test scores, and that determines whether or not they're gonna build more prisons or not. Now, to me, both of these theories, they run together. Because one, if you don't know about yourself, then you're gonna be ignorant about stuff. And then two, they already banking on you to go to prison based off your test scores. So we're gonna uneducate you and send you to prison. Is that how y'all view it, or is something different?
No, you're right, Miss Rob. Okay, once the one kid loses to learn or engage in that learning environment, starting at third grade. As a matter of fact, I hope many of you all have read this literature, The Conspiracy to Destroy Young Black Boys, by the most outstanding educator, Kwanzaa Kunjufo. Excuse me. He highlights these issues about how learning within boys, it appears to lessen once they reach that 7th grade level. Okay, now from early childhood up until 6th grade, for some reason, African American boys, they are engaged in learning. They like performing in school, they participate in the educational process. But for some odd reason, after 6th grade, pushed into the 12th grade, that desire dissipates and things of that nature. And it could be a culmination of factors. And one major factor is this: we absolutely need more African American males to become school teachers, particularly at the kindergarten, first and second level. Okay, we need gatekeepers with regards to watching how our kids are being recommended for special education, particularly the ones that don't need it. And why are they doing this? Why? Okay, we also need to be more proactive with regards to the learning of our young ladies, with regards to the cultural affinity of what it means to be a woman of African descent. Okay, and we need to sort of lessen the jargon when we call ourselves people of color. We are African people that happen to be Americanized.
Now, with that being said, Dr. Scott, and I want everybody's opinion on this, and we've gone through this watering down terminologies that seem to deregulate the strength of our culture. What do we do? How do we attack the problem of, yes, we need more Black male teachers, but they don't want more Black male teachers? How do we combat the social stereotype of African American, Black, people of color? When and how do we come back to a position of power where we do have more positive role models such as yourselves, Brother Bernard and Dr. Finkley, in these schools to teach predominantly these schools that are majority minority Black kids that need that presence there? What do we do next? Unmute your mic, B.
Well, I would suggest this. I suggest this. And sorry, Mr. Brother, I would suggest that we become more involved with regards to the school systems, being on the school board. Don't be afraid to run for the board of trustees of your school board. Be active in the Parent Teachers Association. Volunteer, be involved. You know, it's frightening when little black boys and little black girls, when I volunteer at a local school and they say, we ain't never seen a black doctor a day in our life. That's scary.
Very.
We got to show them that future. We got to show them it exists, and we gotta galvanize ourselves politically as far as in the area of education. That's the only way we'll see change. Is if we galvanize.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Bernard.
Yeah, I'm just gonna lean back. Short term, figure out a way to get into the schools, but long term, these are the state schools, and the state schools serve the purpose of the state, which is why we're in the condition we are right now, because that is their curriculum. These are their standardized tests. Those gatekeepers, these white liberal women, who are the majority of our school systems, they're not going nowhere, especially with gentrification into our cities. And so we literally are beating our head against the wall trying to get a state school to be a nurturing environment for Black African children. And again, Malcolm X, he told us it's a reason they killed that man, because he was telling us the truth. These are their schools. Marcus Klein with Freedom Home Academy in Chicago, that's the answer right there. I think he's about to open one in Atlanta. But his curriculum, those students are like off the charts, ridiculous, you know what I mean? But even the suggestion that, we go into the schools, I've taught at middle school and high school level. I've been an administrator in the high schools and the middle school. They are hostile places for Black men. That's a reality.
Yes, they are.
They're extremely hostile. So even if you want to go in with good intentions, you're going with an Afrocentric mind, you got the books for the kids to read, you want to take them on those trips, you're running full speed into a brick wall, and you will burn out extremely quickly, as I have, having to work in these spaces, which are pretty much hostile to not only our kids, but myself we're 2%. Black men are 2% of education for a reason. It's hostile as I don't know what. And it's white woman friendly. And that's two totally opposite ends of the spectrum. So who are they accommodating?
But let me ask you this. I had a conversation with several scholars. I'm always talking to somebody. What was it when you had your first African American teacher? What grade was you in?
My first and only Black male teacher I've had in grade school was in the 8th grade.
Okay.
And that's when I knew right then and there I wanted to be in education. Right then and there, because I loved, before then, all my teachers were female, few Black female teachers, majority white. But I knew from that moment I wanted to make a difference in another child's life at that moment when I had him. So 8th grade, but my only one until I went to my HBCU.
Of course. Anybody else?
I always had a Black teacher, and I had a Black male teacher when I went to a private school when I was growing up in New York. That's all we had. That was my experience. I never had a white teacher until I moved to Dayton, Ohio. So my first white teacher, I want to say, 6th grade.
6th, 8th. This seemed like a trend.
6th grade.
Mr. Creamer.
Yeah, I had majority white women teachers. I definitely remember Black faces in the classrooms, but there wasn't anybody that made me want to be an educator or a revolutionary or a community advocate, just pretty much, teachers or whatever. And going back a little bit, I want to agree with Dr. Scott. He made one extremely important point about us organizing politically in terms of controlling our communities and what comes into our communities in terms of education and that sort of thing. But yeah, my education has been super white for the most part.
Dr. Scott.
My dad was a agronomy and chemistry. My grandparents were both educators. My grandparents held the distinction of being the first Black couple to get a master's degree in education at the University of Georgia.
Okay.
So it wasn't nothing to have activities surrounding education, but I wanted to become an educator because it's like the impact that you can make, particularly on, I've taught everything from early childhood all the way to 12th grade, but a lot of my impact is on the post-secondary level because it seems like in the collegiate environment, they'll try to water African American studies and the importance down. It's like, it wasn't for me attending 2 HBCU and feeling that energy and that pride and that meant the service. Then I think as far as my knowledge of the history and the knowledge itself, it wouldn't be as great as it is.
Okay. And Mr. Sinclair, when was yours?
Well, growing up in metropolitan Detroit, I had a pleasant mixture of both Black and white instructors. And, I was pleasantly surprised at how many those were male outside, and the brothers could speak to this, that weren't gym teachers, that weren't our neighborhood football, basketball, baseball coaches. So I think that's one of the small advantages, at least from my educational historical viewpoint. We had a good mixture, but I did have a pretty substantial amount coming up through school where we had Black faces, and that a few males that we did have were other than the coach. So,
or the custodian,
or the custodian, right?
Or the lunch lady. Just put
that
it. Y'all know I'm transparent about stuff. That's all I know to be.
Look, or let's just take it deeper. Or the city police officer that was there to secure the property.
That
was the other Black male that you saw. If we're doing that, let's just call it what it is.
The bus driver. We go there. I mean, and I pose that question because if you think about it, even in our own childhoods, my parents are both educators. My dad was a 6th grade teacher. So a lot of people that went to the school, they still call him dad. I have a problem with that, but I understand now why they did, if that makes sense. Like, I don't like to share my parents with nobody, but everybody loves my parents for some reason. But if you look at that and then you look through a lens of a child, like they did a story here in Texas where this school had their first Black history program. I was like, we always have Black history program. Their first Black history program, and the little boy on the interview was like, this is my first time seeing a Black male teacher. Why? And he's in 6th grade. And everybody on this panel today had their first encounter around 6th grade with a Black male teacher.
High school.
No, mine was 1st grade. I had a Black male teacher in 1st grade. I remember Mr. Lee. I don't know if he's watching, but Mr. Lee didn't play. But I didn't have my first white teacher until 6th grade.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
And something else Dr. Scott said that kind of triggered something for me as well. Yes, we have to become more advocates, especially for Black male teachers. So we need to start supporting programs like the Call Me Mr. program that originates from Clemson University, right? Having more things like that in order to expose our youth to the field of education, because it's all about exposure.
Or the Real Men Teach. I think he's out of Morehouse, and his wife is a principal from Spelman. I can't think of his name, but it's a wonderful program.
Mm-hmm.
The Real Men Teach. And I mean, why? Why is it one? And I hope I don't offend anybody because that's not my intent, but I can only tell you what I see. When there are male teachers in the room, they're not your strongest male teachers. They're, pushovers. It's a whole different ball game. And sometimes I just look, I'm like, where did this come from? You scared of the kids?
I could tell you where it comes from. I could tell you where it comes from. It comes from, Mr. Cream mentioned that, the white woman who's running the school system. I've watched Black male teachers lose their voice because, again, here we go. You coming into my neighborhood and you're going to tell me how to interact with someone who looks like me. So I have to either do it your way or I have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is I'll do it your way for the year and I'm out.
Mm.
And so they're very quiet. So they're not really weak per se. They're being told that the way that they interact with the kids is wrong.
Got it.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, but piggybacking off of what you're saying, for the better part of my career, I don't have like culture and climate issues in my classroom. I tell the kids I don't call the police. We deal with everything in house. We ain't getting deans down there, no principals, none of that. But the schools, even being hired, some of the schools I've worked in, they're literally leaning on that Black male to be the disciplinarian in the building for like an entire floor or something because you're a Black male. So you're supposed to just intimidate the kids and you're supposed to be the bad cop. And I ain't doing that. You know what I mean? It's like I love these kids and I'm going to be what I'm supposed to be for them, but I'm not going to be here just to be your disciplinarian because you think it's a scary Black male. I'm supposed to be in here to, control the kids. That's the other part of that discussion. But they don't view us as being cerebral, as being critical thinkers, that sort of thing or whatever. Just, that Black male figure that can hold it down. And even in DC, a whole bunch of us got hired as assistant principals. And after a year or two, I realized that they were literally hiring a whole bunch of Black males just to fire those 300 older Black teachers that had been here. So they basically tried to make us HNICs. And I walked away, like I'm not doing it. And it wasn't based on, what they were doing in the classroom, their acumen or their aptitude. They were literally trying to clean out all the older Black teachers, union affiliated, union heads, pillars in the community. DC is the most aggressively gentrifying area in the United States. Wow. And so in order for that to happen, all of that stuff had to happen in terms of getting rid of those older teachers and stuff like that. So they've used us to suit their needs. You know what I mean? It's not to empower Black kids. It's all types of other stuff, including coaching.
And I've seen it. I've definitely seen it on both ends too. When I was a teacher, go out your duties outside, for recess, or your duties monitor the hallways as they leave, for the end of the day.